Hello everyone, welcome to another Darktable landscapes video. In this video we're going to be processing this shot taken at Loch, the boathouses at Loch. If you've ever been, it's a wonderful location, especially good in the autumn. The Loch can be very still, you often get some lovely mist, and this shot's no different, a lovely misty morning. Let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is a simple lens correction, just to take into account the wide angle of the lens. It's simply a matter of turning it on, and Darktable will generally find the lens you're looking for and apply the correction automatically. And the next thing I want to do is, it may be hard to notice, but it's there when you do see it, is just here is a car parked on the side of the road, which kind of ruins the ambience. So I'm going to retouch this out first. Go into the retouch module. I'm going to draw in a shape. Let's go. It's kind of split by a tree. So what I'm going to do is do it in two halves. Either side of the tree. I'm going to pull in the feathering here, so that we don't get any kind of weird artifacts. It's not kind of copying itself in odd places. It's pretty good. And then to add another shape, I'm going to hold Control and click the same path tool again and essentially repeat the process. It's relatively straightforward. I'm going to choose, I'm going to move this second blob shape path, whatever you want to call it, and that's where it's going to kind of clone from. So naturally we don't want to clone the boathouses into the trees. Pull that in a little bit. And I think, given that it's relatively obscure in the background, I don't want to affect that boathouse too much either. That should be pretty good. So just turn off the path preview. There we go. That's pretty much unnoticeable now. Okay, now we can get on with the more creative part of the processing. The first thing I want to do is go into our sigmoid module, our tone mapper, and just lift the blacks a little bit, just to contribute to the mistiness of the image. So you can see if we really raise this up, we're destroying all the blacks, but we want a little bit of mistiness. And this was an autumn morning, and the trees were actually somewhat more autumnal than they appear in the photo. They look a bit green in the actual shot, but they were more yellow and brown and orange, more autumnal colours. And I want to pull that back in with the processing. So let's go to colour calibration as well, our white balance. The automatic setting has made this a little bit cool, so I'm going to just adjust it a little bit to avoid it getting too cool. I'd rather control that with other modules afterwards. So that's pretty good. That's fine. Go into our colour balance RGB module. Always a favourite. Going to give it some more vibrance. A little more contrast, some general chroma, some saturation, and then we're going to do our kind of normal stepped saturation boost, more in the shadows, slightly less in the midtones and less still on the highlights. Generally gives a more natural result. And then into the brilliance, so I'll boost the brilliance quite a lot, and I'll also drop the shadows. We want to give it some contrast. And we'll boost the mids, boost the highlights. I want this mist to be kind of almost glowing in the top of the frame. It's pretty good. Maybe drop the shadows a little bit more. And I'm going to go from, this is the master tab, I'm going to go into the 4 ways tab, where we can control the luminance and colour of the different aspects of the exposure. So at the moment everything is neutral. I am going to essentially add a little coolness to the shadows in a slight split toning kind of way. So I'm going to select a bluish colour from the hue slider and then just add a little touch of blue. Always come back and adjust this. But given that I'm going to be changing these greens to oranges and yellows, shifting them that way, that will contrast nicely with the blue in the shadows, the subtle bluiness of the shadows, and without cooling the whole image. Okay, and then furthermore in the Masks tab, down here we have the Contrast Grey Fulcrum control. I'm not going to pretend to know how that works. I like to just bump this up a little touch. Okay. Now I want my main focus of the scene to be the boathouses themselves. So what I'm going to do is essentially create kind of a custom vignette using the exposure module. So I'm going to pop the exposure module on. It's going to go absolutely crazy, but I'm just going to drop that down. And in order to create this kind of vignette effect, I'm going to use a drawn mask. So drawn mask and just use a simple ellipse. Pop that there and just kind of focus the attention on this central area, these nice kind of flowing weeds in the pond. This is actually kind of a sub-loch off the main loch. I'm just going to do that, and then it's very tight at the moment, so I'm going to feather that off like that. And then we can adjust our exposure a little bit more. Okay. You can see how we just brightened up that central portion, enhanced the mist a little bit, and drawn the attention to the boathouses a little bit more. That should do the job. And just to further reinforce that focus, that central focus, I also want to darken this kind of bottom left edge here. There's a lot of weed growing in that corner that's kind of pointing out of the frame, if you like. It tends to draw the eye. I want to negate that somewhat, so I'm going to create a new instance of the exposure module by right-clicking on this multiple instance actions icon, and I'm going to drop exposure just so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to use another drawn mask, and this time use a gradient. So from this corner I want the effect to fade out. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel while I'm hovering over the central point just to kind of curve the effect a little bit, give it more natural shaping. And see how that looks. Yeah. Maybe affecting the trees to the left a little bit too much, so I'm just going to drag that way and maybe tilt it a little bit more. There we go. We'll see how that works out when the rest of the processing is done and maybe come back and adjust it. But for now, that's pretty good to me. Okay, now for the colour adjustment. And for this, I'm going to use a relatively new module that just came out with Darktable 4.8, and that's the Color Equalizer. And we'll pop that on. And this lets us change the hue, saturation and brightness of colours in the image simply by dragging this curve. So if I click the little eyedropper here, place the tool on our green trees, that's telling us we need to kind of adjust this region in order to change the colour when I'm in the hue tab. So we're changing the hue, the colour. And I want to drag this down more towards the red and orange so that we get that more autumnal look. Again, not too much, very easy to completely overcook these kind of things and then things quickly become unnatural, which we don't want at all. It's pretty good. Just a little hint of yellowing to it rather than pure summer green. To say it was more like that in reality. And if we want to, we can maybe just bump up the saturation a touch. and the brightness, just to make them pop a little. It's pretty good. Just turn the effect off. So there we have quite a green, and more autumnal yellows. Now, one thing we are probably doing is affecting the green of the boathouse. Obviously, that doesn't change with the seasons. It's not too bad, actually. If I pop my eyedropper on here, we can see that we're we've not hit that node. It's still on its baseline, so it's not too bad. If I was to start playing with it here, then we'd start to change the coloration, but it's not too bad. We're just missing it. We could mask this off if we were having trouble, but I don't think we need to, thanks to the power of the Color Equalizer. Now I want to add more contrast. For this I'm going to use the Tone Equalizer module. And before we start using this, we're going to adjust the masking. So we go to the Masking tab, we click the magic wands for exposure compensation and contrast compensation, and then we're working with the right histogram. So I want to lower the dark tones. So if I move my mouse into the image, we can see that where I'm hovering will again show us a line of the tones of where we're affecting it. So I want to lower the darks, so we're down towards kind of -6, -5. Lower those darks down just a touch. And then I want to really enhance this misty feeling. If I reduce, so we can see we're kind of in the +0, -1 range. If I bring these down as well, you'll see I'll do the opposite of that. I'm actually kind of increasing clarity, if you like. I'm making it less misty. So I in fact want to do the opposite of that. I want to increase the mistiness, give it kind of almost a glow. There we go. So give it a little bit more drama just with that simple step. Just looking at that now, I think probably will need to adjust our exposure gradient down here. It's gone a little too dark for my liking, but we'll come to that later on. We can always work with that. Looks pretty good to me. Now I want to add some clarity and texture. Capital C, capital T, if you're used to Lightroom. For this in Darkroom we use the Contrast Equalizer. So I'm going to pop this on. I'm going to go to make sure I'm in the Luma tab first of all. So the first instance of this I'm going to use is for clarity. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel so it kind of goes off the edges of this this graph. And I'm going to very gently increase it because it's very easy to overcook this effect and really get a crispy image. We don't want that. We want nice subtle changes. That's fine. And then I'm going to make a new instance by right-clicking the icon again. And this time I'm going to leave the circle the same size as the default. I'm going to increase it at this end a little bit and increase it at this end a little bit for texture. So let's turn the texture off. So here we are with our clarity. And here we are with texture. Now, I don't want to lose the mistiness of these trees that are fading away into the mist. So I'm going to mask these off. I'll add a mask to the Contrast Equalizer with the Draw Mask tool, use the Path tool, and it's fine for these nearer objects that aren't so misty to have a bit of clarity and a bit of texture, but I want to exclude pretty much everything else. So I'm just going to click a general shape around here. That's about right. I'm going to add some feathering to it. And now you can see we're only adding our clarity to nearer things that would be clear. And our trees that are misty retain their mistiness. So I'm just going to pull this in a little bit to make sure we're not clarifying things we don't need to clarify. And now that I've drawn this mask on the contrast equalizer, there's no point in duplicating another drawn mask. I can go to my texture version, if you like, click raster mask and choose the contrast equalizer mask, and that will apply the same mask I've just done. So we're not doing things twice. What I do want to do maybe is just add a little bit more texture and sharpness, if you like, to the boathouses, just to really pick them out. So I'm going to duplicate, rather than make a new instance of the contrast equalizer, I'm going to duplicate the existing one where I'm adding clarity and texture, or just texture rather. There we go. And I'm going to this time go back to the drawn mask and yeah, let's draw another mask just so it's not too sloppy. There we go. Line in a little bit. Doesn't matter too much if we add more texture to these trees because they do have texture. So I'm going to go to my Luma and I'm going to be a bit more aggressive at this end with the graph. I'll also go to this Edges tab, just pull up these edges. You can see that's just enhanced the texture of the boards and the roofs of the boathouses themselves a little bit more. And just to be organised, I'll control click on here and I'll titles to these so I know which is which if I come back to it. Call this global texture and boathouse texture. Perfect. Okay, looking at the colours again, I think this looks a little too yellow, a little too maybe kind of green yellow rather than warm orange yellows. So I'm going to go back to my, let's have a look, where are we? Color Equalizer. And I'm going to need to nudge this curve slightly more towards the orangey pink section of the spectrum here. So I'm going to use node placement and shift it to the left, and you can see how that's nudging the whole thing leftwards. And now we're getting some more kind of true autumnal colours in rather than the slightly kind of bilious green and yellow we had before. That's better. Yeah. So I want to add some general vignetting, but before I do that, I need to address this slightly over darkened corner. So I'm going to go back to my exposure module here that's masked to that corner. Just drag it back up again a little bit. Yeah, that's better. And now I'll add some more general vignetting, so we'll pop that in. I've got a preset for this, so basic vignette with no desaturation. The default desaturates the corners as well, which is a bizarre choice as far as I can see. I'm not sure why that's done. I think it's to match maybe a low-mo camera or something like that, but I don't like it. We don't want to vignette this kind of nice bright mist that we've taken a lot of care to maintain, so I'm going to drag the center point up to here. And yeah, it's not too bad at all. Move this over a little bit, make it slightly more oblong. There we go. Perfect. And now I will add a frame as well. Again, I've got a default for this, a preset rather, 5% white, so just the standard, but reduced to 5% of a border size. The standard's a little bit thick for my liking. That's all good. Now the final step is to just do some sharpening and local contrast. So for sharpening and local contrast, we use diffuse or sharpen, and I will use the lens deblur medium preset first of all. Sharpen things up, and I don't think that's too sharp in the misty areas. That has sharpened the whole image, but in general that's not too bad. Let me just turn it off and on again. that's okay. And now I want to make a new instance of this, right click again on the icon, and this time use the local contrast fast preset. And we want to move this above our sigmoid tone mapper module. So I hold Control and Shift and drag it above. And yeah, so let me just pop that off and on again. That looks good to me. Okay, now let's look at a before and after. So I'm going to take a snapshot of this final step and then scroll down to, say, where we did lens corrections. And I can click back on our snapshot. That will give us a slider we can use to view the before and after. So before, pretty flat, pretty dull, very green, and not very dramatic. And then after, much more autumnal, much more dramatic, mistier, and we focused our attention on where we want our viewer to look, which is this central area, the boathouses. Remove the car from the background to the point that it's not really noticeable anymore. And I think that looks a better image. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.